know that reading can change your life, but where do you even start? You've heard that successful people read a lot. You've seen the gigantic book lists. Maybe you've even bought some books and they just sit there untouched. Or maybe you've tried to get into reading before, but you either got bored, you didn't retain anything, or you just couldn't stick with it. Today, I'm going to be breaking down 5 essential tips to start reading for personal development in a way that sticks. If you're already in the process of reading to try to improve yourself, this is going to help you get way more out of every book. This isn't just how to read more books kind of advice. This is about building habits. This is about picking the right books. This is about having the right mindset going into trying to read with the intention of trying to make your own life better. By the end of this video, you're not going to just be motivated to start. You're going to have a clear, actionable strategy to have reading work for you. And stick around until the end because I have so many of my own personal mistakes that I've made trying to get better at reading for developing myself. And many of these I did for years. What's the biggest mistake that a lot of beginners are going to make when trying to start reading for themselves? The answer? Picking books that they think they should read instead of books that actually matter to them. If it doesn't feel relevant, you won't stick with it and you won't remember it. If you've ever looked up a huge list of like the top 100 books that everybody has to read and felt a little bit overwhelmed, yeah, same. Here's the truth. Reading isn't about checking off a list of the classics. It's about individual growth. And the best book for you is the one that fits your life and your needs right now. So tip number 1, relevance matters. So how do you pick the books that are right for you? To start, tie them in with your current goals. Are you struggling with focus? Then get a book on focus. Do you want to make more money? Then read a book on financial literacy. Are you trying to get healthier? Then read a book on your physical health. Are you feeling stuck? Then read a book about overcoming obstacles. A book is a tool, so find the right tool for the right job. And I hope that this sounds almost insultingly obvious, but this is a real problem that I hear about all the time. Instead of reading the book that people need right now, they turn to a billionaire's book list or anything else that says over 1 million copies sold. I bet you there's some really good catches in there, but that's somebody else's journey in their time. It does not mean that the books that were the most transformational for them are going to serve you in the same way, especially where you are in your life right now. So if a book is relevant to you, you are far more likely to remember it. There's a lot of personal anecdotes in personal development books where the author talks about their experience. And especially when it comes to their own personal reading habits, this is frequently covered. And I've come across this example several times where they read something that eventually absolutely changed the course of their life. But sometimes it's something that they read 5 years ago and it didn't resonate with them at all. And then they read it again for some reason. Next thing you know, that is the thing that made the biggest difference in their life. And it was the exact same information. It was the exact same quote or the exact same concept. But this highlights how important relevance is in reading for growth. And you know what? If you don't really know where to start, you can do recommended books. That's fine. However, recommended books are great, but they're not the law. They're not the be-all, end-all. If a book keeps showing up in conversations, it's probably because it has really broad value. But remember that doesn't mean that it's going to be valuable for you right now. Absolutely. So even if a book comes highly recommended or it's on one of those must-read lists, if it's not valuable for you right now, it can wait. Now, let me give a little counterpoint here to almost contradict myself. I'm going to do a little U-turn. You might need to read some books that you don't want to read. Sometimes the books that we need the most are the ones that we are trying to resist. Money, health, relationships, leadership. It could make you uncomfortable because it challenges you in a way that you're not ready to face yet. But growth lives in discomfort. Avoiding books on personal finance won't fix money problems. Ignoring relationship books won't make you a better communicator. Skipping books on health are not going to make you feel better. Sometimes the topics that we're avoiding are the actual ones that are keeping us stuck, and we do not want to engage with that. So, here's my action step. Pick one book that is absolutely relevant to you right now in your life that you need to pick up, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not. No big pressure, no must reads, just a book that's actually going to serve you. You want to know what happened when I started reading to better myself? I'll tell you what happened. In the eternal words of Kurt Vonnegut, doodly squat, nothing happened. When I first got into personal development, I went full speed ahead. Full books on the bookshelf, full Amazon cart full of books. I wanted to fix everything right now. And guess what? I did read a ton, but my life didn't change. Tip number 2, how much you read should serve you. Let me tell you a quick story. When I first committed myself to reading for personal growth, I committed myself to reading 52 books in 1 year, like one book every week. Absolutely non-negotiable, had to do it. And you know what? I crushed that goal. I got over 70 books in 1 year. Now, this isn't me bragging. This is almost admitting a mistake here. Because do you know what the irony is? When I was doing this, the book that I was actually reading, when I made that commitment, that's this book right here, The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster by Darren Hardy. And you want to know what Darren Hardy said? There's a section in here where he was talking about starting Success Magazine. I'm pretty sure it's Success Magazine. It's been a long time since I've read this book. But he started getting letters from his readers and from his fans, and thanking him for everything that he's doing, and now they're feeling motivated, yada, yada, yada. One person wrote in and they said, hey, thank you so much for this. Because of you, I've been inspired to read a ton of books. And Darren Hardy felt like he failed his readership. Darren Hardy did not want people to read 1 billion books. Darren Hardy wanted people to read one book 1 billion times. And here I am, super excited to read a ton of books, making this commitment to myself, when all of a sudden I'm reading that that's what someone who creates Success Magazine recommends you should not do. So naturally, I did the opposite. Not because I thought he was wrong, but it was more so I didn't know what I needed to go deep on. This was all new territory for me. My plan was simple: expose myself to as many things as I can possibly be exposed to, so that I could later decide what was worthy for me to go in for a deep dive. I believe Darren Hardy is correct. You're going to get way more out of really getting into the depths of a book rather than superficially reading 100 books in a year. But if you know what your intention is, if you know what your plan is, and you're trying to see what you want to go into, I don't think that's a bad strategy. And I mean, I don't regret what I did. But looking back, I really realized that those 70 books didn't change my life in any meaningful way. Maybe it was impressive to be able to tell people that I read that much, but nothing really changed. Why? Because I was too busy moving on to the next book to actually sit and implement anything that was told to me in that book. So the next year, I did something exactly different. I took 5 of my favorite books that I really got something out of, even though I was getting through them really quick, and I ended up doing a deep dive into all of those books. I read each of them 5 times. I spent a ton of time with them, and I ripped them apart. I mean, not literally, but, I'm talking annotations, notes, conversations with people about the books. And that actually led to some pretty good progress. So how can reading serve you better? Well, decide. Are you going to read a lot, or are you going to read in depth? Either way is fine. There's no prize for reading the most books. The only thing that really matters is that eventually you do apply what you're reading. Next, there's no rules to reading. Should you skim through the book? Should you read every single word? Should you finish the book? I personally believe in finishing a book that I've started, unless I absolutely hate it. However, in the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, he talks about how he just picks books up, skims through them, gets what he needs out of them, and moves on. There's no right answer here. It's just what works for you. But one thing I do recommend is ask yourself, what do I need from this book? And that's going to give you a pretty decent guideline. Too many people will pick up a book without purpose and then wonder why they get nothing from it. Your goal is going to determine your approach. Are you reading to spark ideas? Great. Then skim superficially. Are you reading to master a skill? Well, then take notes and apply. So, all of that being said, here's my action step. Before you start your next book, write down one question that you're going to need it to answer. Reading with intention is the difference between just filling your head or changing your life. Does this sound familiar? I don't have time to read. Lies. Let's be honest. When you say, I don't have time to read, what you're saying is, I don't prioritize reading. And that's fine. Just call it what it is. If you have time to scroll, you have time to read. I don't want to lose viewers, but if you have time to watch this, you have time to read. The trick isn't finding time to read. It's about making reading part of a process. Here's how to build a simple reading habit that can stick. One is just schedule it. Pick a time that you intend to read. In the morning with your coffee? Great. In the afternoon with lunch? Great. At night with dinner? Great. Right before bed? Great. All of those can work. You can do one of them, you can do all of them. But somewhere within that is time to read. And you want to treat this time like it's a meeting with yourself that you would not skip. If you're putting it on your schedule, it should be non-negotiable. The next tip is just have a backup. You can keep your books with you in a bag. You can have digital copies. You can be listening on your phone on something like Audible. No matter how you want to take in your reading, always have some variation of it with you. Listen while driving. Read while you're waiting in line. Make reading more accessible to you so that there is no excuse. Quick story on how I started audiobooks. I was a beat your chest physical copy purist for a very long time. It was physical copy or die. No Kindle, no ebooks, no audiobooks, nothing. Physical only. But when I decided and committed myself to reading over 50 books in 1 year, something had to give. And one of the things that I learned was that if I'm painting, then I can actually listen to an audiobook and pay attention. So I'm getting two things done at once, which is amazing. And eventually, through that, I caught the audiobook bug. Now I am an audiobook nut. I'm still a physical copy fanatic. Like, if I buy an audiobook, I also buy the physical copy, which is, very superfluous, so I would not make that as a sweeping recommendation. But audiobooks are great for when you are doing things that don't require your full attention. So with that, just start with giving yourself some kind of reading commitment. Make it extremely accessible so that you can't not do it. And start with just 5 or 10 minutes a day. Don't try to jump into an hour-long reading session if that time isn't currently available to you. You might need to shift some things around in order to get there if that's part of your goals. But again, whatever you do has to be something that serves you. So set a 10-minute timer tomorrow and read. No pressure, no expectations, just start. The goal isn't to finish the book overnight. It's to prove to yourself that reading can fit into your life. Ever finish a book and remember absolutely nothing? That's because reading and learning can be both passive or active depending on how you approach. Tip number 4 is don't just read the material, understand the material. If you just skim through the words without engaging, then your brain lets go of everything that you've picked up like it never happened. Reading well is not about how many books you read or how fast you read. It's about how you immerse yourself in the reading. Here's how to actually retain a lot of what you read. First, engage with the book as you read. Underline, highlight, annotate, write notes as you're reading. If there's a section that hits you really, really hard and you're listening to it on Audible, you can bookmark that section and write notes on it. I will personally deface my books by dog-earing them, and I'll go back and look at what I thought was interesting at that time. Next is take a quick pause at the end of any section or at the end of a chapter just to reflect on what you just read. I do this all the time, and part of this is just daydreaming about how I would apply what I just read in my day-to-day life. Try to summarize the idea of what you just read, and if you can't really explain it, you probably didn't absorb it. Talk to somebody about what you learned. Explain it to a friend. Post about it. Teach it. I know I mentioned that in the last video that we made, but this still holds true right now. Teaching is one of the best ways for you to retain information for yourself. It's an extremely powerful learning reinforcement. Next, keep a reading log. Sometimes looking at a list of the books that you've read is like weirdly motivating. It can remind you of a lot of the concepts that you've already learned. And especially if you've taken notes and you can connect those notes to what you're reading right now, that will definitely help you understand it better. There's a whole process called mind mapping where you can start to integrate related things, or sometimes you can even make good connections with things that don't seem as though they are related. So revisiting old material is actually often a great idea. And this kind of ties back into when I was talking about earlier in this video when other authors that have written their own books had aha moments when they've revisited a book that they've already read before. And this time, the context in which they're reading it has changed, and that has made all of the difference. So reviewing old material is definitely something that I would advise. So quick action step on this. The next time you finish reading something, whether it's a chapter or it's an entire book, I want you to try to explain it to somebody in 30 seconds. Have you ever read something and you just immediately think, this isn't going to work for me? Tip number 5 is suspend disbelief. Now listen, I am so guilty of this one. I get it. When I first started my personal development journey, I would question everything. Oh yeah, sure, that worked for them, but they had money. Oh, they had better connections than I have, so, oh, this was easy for them because of their network. They're just smarter than I am, so that's why they were able to get through this problem. Easy to read a book and focus on why it won't work for you. But here's the truth. Every successful person started somewhere, and many of them started as average people. A lot of the people that I read about were just normal people that ended up finding great success. And when I say finding great success, I really mean building great success through immense effort. But they were just like us. They weren't born with an instruction manual. A lot of the times, you're reading the one that they created through trial and error. Next is, you're not supposed to copy them exactly. Oftentimes, you need to adapt a lot of the information that they give you into your own life, into the context of your own life. And we also should look at many of their stories as motivation, that even though what you're going through is real, it's not a life sentence. The fact that something feels difficult where we are does not mean that we're stuck here forever. Other people have gotten out of it. And the less we can try to separate ourselves from them, the less that we believe that they have something that we don't, the more likely it is that we can use their information to expedite our growth. So here's my last action step, especially on this one. Whenever you're thinking about making some kind of a change and you dive into a book to see how you can do that, I want you to think, what is one thing that I can try from this book, even if I don't think it's gonna work? Because, I mean, honestly, it goes back to the very old saying, you don't know until you try. So guys, to close it up, if you really want reading to change your life, you have to be intentional. Apply these 5 steps, and I can guarantee that you're going to see a difference. Now, I want to hear from you guys. What's a book that has made one of the biggest impacts in your own life? If you don't have one yet, what are some books that you're thinking about reading right now to help move you forward? Everyone, I wish you happy reading. Bye.